Lion. Focus on a film star. Lion is perhaps one of the most famous of the early locomotives and an incredible survivor of the period. She has become a star of the screen, most famously in the Titfield Thunderbolt. This film examines Lion in detail, discovering what made her such an exciting locomotive and how she fitted into early Victorian locomotive development. Lion is perhaps one of the most familiar of the early railway locomotives, second only to Stephenson's rocket. Here she stands in Manchester's Museum of Science and Industry, proudly displaying the craftsmanship of a bygone age. The locomotive was built in 1838 by Todd, Kitson and Laird for use on the newly built Liverpool and Manchester Railway. Lion was thus part of a generation of locomotives helping to further the cause of intercity rail travel. The Liverpool and Manchester was the world's first intercity railway link, opening in 1830 to great public excitement and anxiety. The railway incorporated many types of terrain, from the boggy marshes of Chat Moss to staggeringly deep cuttings such as Olive Mount cutting. The constructors also needed to create huge man-made structures to bridge vast depressions in the landscape. Sankey Viaduct, pictured here, is one such example. Mike Lee met up with historian Dr. Michael Bailey at the site of the old Liverpool Road station in Manchester for a tour of the site.
So this is where you'd have come to buy a ticket?
Yes, for first-class passengers. They were very segregated. First and second-class passengers would not mix, but they would come through from their carriages outside in the street, through the door, come into here, and then they would book their tickets here at the desk. We're not entirely sure that this was exactly how it was laid out in 1830, but it's a pretty good representation of how the passengers would have booked their tickets. Then afterwards, of course, they would have gone up the stairs, up to the waiting room on the first floor, which is on the same level as the railway line, and they would have waited to have been called to board the train.
So a very similar process to today, but no Aptis machines and probably a quill pen.
Yes, exactly so. In fact, the tickets weren't pre-prepared. They all had to be laboriously written out. It must have taken quite a long time.
Right. And of course the class system reigns.
Very much so. Oh yes, first and second class never mixed.
So this is actually the Liverpool Road station of 1830. I know this particular bit here is a bit later, but this is where you would have arrived from Liverpool by train at the opening of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway.
That's right, yes, exactly. This is the 1830 station, and on the other side we've got the 1830 warehouse. Not only was the railway built for carrying goods, but also for carrying passengers. Numbers of passengers were far outstripped all that they expected, so it was quite remarkable, the latent demand for travel that there was at that time. But the amount of goods was really very impressive. They brought the cotton in that had been shipped in through the port of Liverpool. The cotton goods were being exported in the reverse order. Foodstuffs, barrels and crates and that sort of thing were also brought in. So it was a remarkable change in the whole way of transport of people and goods.
It must have actually transformed the whole economic existence of both Manchester and Liverpool. And of course it's 175 years ago, I think, this year, isn't it?
That's right. We are celebrating that 175th anniversary here at the museum over 4 days in September, between the 15th and the 18th. So it'll be a big occasion for people to put in their diaries. We're calling it the Riot of Steam. And we are inviting onto the site the replica of the rocket from the National Railway Museum, the replica of Sans-Pareil from the NRM's Locomotion Museum in Childon, and the replica of Novelty, which is coming all the way across from Sweden. So there we've got the three participants of the Rainhill trials, together of course with our own Planet replica, and not forgetting Lion as well. So it's going to be quite an occasion. We're going to have a cavalcade, lots of sideshows, and of course the opportunity to ride behind each of the locomotives in turn.
It sounds absolutely superb. So middle of September, I think I'll be here.
Lion was built in a period of very rapid change in locomotive design. She was to seem both extremely large in her youth and extremely small only a couple of decades later. When we compare Lion to the Stephensons' first major commercial effort, Locomotion, the latter appears both small and primitive, though it was no less revolutionary just over a decade earlier. Both Sans-Pareil and Rocket were also outclassed by the new level of modernity that Lion offered, the position of the valve gear and cylinders perhaps affording the most dramatic visual change. There was, as with most design development, however, a degree of continuity with the past. Wooden cladding on the boiler, tall chimneys, and open cabs still remained an important feature of locomotives at this time. These two views of a contemporary design, known as copper knobs, demonstrate the still primitive working conditions offered to footplate crews. Lion was designed to be what was known as a luggage engine. This meant she was suitable for hauling light goods and passengers, though she was capable of pulling up to 100 tons. Lion was developed from the Stephenson's Planet design of locomotive, with some important modifications. She had 3 axles. Even though the third was merely a trailing axle, it allowed the room for a longer boiler and larger firebox. Inevitably, this made Lion more powerful, helping the Liverpool and Manchester Railway to develop their operations. The smokebox is relatively simple in design, with crudely designed doors that provide an inadequate vacuum. The smokebox tubes, exhaust, and tops of the inside cylinders, similar to those of Planet, can be seen in this view. Early buffers were stuffed with horsehair, providing a little primitive cushioning. Thanks to the extra room afforded by the third axle, Lion's boiler is able to be relatively substantial and of course was multi-tubular as standard. Here she carries her nameplate proudly. Crank axles, such a vital part of the moving mechanism of the locomotive, were in fact extremely prone to failures in the early days of steam. They were difficult to forge and machine to sufficient strength to withstand the dynamic forces of a locomotive going along the track. In the 1840s, attempts were made to avoid the problem by redesigning frames or by using outside cylinders. The Haycock firebox, a classic piece of 1830s locomotive design, is also an interesting feature of Lion. It was tasked with capturing steam that was not too wet so that water did not end up in the cylinders, causing the engine to prime. It was effectively a firebox-dome combination. The footplate on Lion is spacious, with the Haycock firebox giving extra height, if not protection. Even at this stage of development, after water gauges had been accepted into locomotive design, tricocks were still viewed as the fail-safe method for checking how much water was in the boiler. The Titfield Thunderbolt, one of the most popular Ealing Studios comedies of the 1950s, starred the now aging Lion. Nonetheless, the locomotive gave a splendid performance to the acclaim of many rail enthusiasts. Ivor Peters was able to capture some moments of the filming in the images shown here. Overall, Lion embodied both continuing trends of design from the past as well as innovations for the future. She captured the imagination of both Victorian engineers and entrepreneurs. This star of rail and screen was to be superseded relatively rapidly, however, as locomotive design steamed ahead.